Not every marriage begins with passionate kisses and intense nights. Sometimes true love is born in silence, in awkward hugs, in glances that say, "I'm here," even without knowing how to love properly. Anna married a sweet but distant man, someone who loved her, but didn't know how to show it. For a long time she believed the problem was with her, that not being touched, not being desired, not being felt, was something she'd have to learn to live with. But everything changed one night. A night when he said nothing. He simply surprised her while she was cooking. What seemed like a simple gesture was the beginning of something much bigger. A slow, intimate, and profound transformation. An awakening that would show her that even the most closed hearts can learn to love with the body, the soul, and with genuine intentions. This story is not about perfection. It's about the power of patience, presence, and the daily choice to stay. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and tell us in the comments, where are you listening to this story from? Your like helps this channel grow and keep bringing emotional stories like this one. Share it with someone special. From the outside, Michael seemed like the perfect husband. He was steady, respectful, and quiet, the kind of man who never raised his voice or caused a scene. People would often compliment Anna on how lucky she was to have married such a calm soul. But calm, as she had learned, could be a double-edged sword. And sometimes calm felt a lot like distance. They had been married for almost a year now, but in many ways it still felt like they were dating, carefully, cautiously, as if testing the waters before diving in. Their conversations were always polite, their routines smooth and harmonious. Michael never forgot to refill her coffee cup in the morning or ask how her day had been. But behind the sweetness was a strange absence, a missing current, a silence she couldn't quite name, but could feel every time she reached for his hand and found it resting passively in hers. When they were still dating, Anna had brushed it off. Michael had always been a bit reserved, a little shy. He wasn't the kind of man who would pull you into a passionate kiss under the rain or press you against the kitchen wall just because he couldn't resist. His affection was quieter. He bought her flowers for no reason, made sure her car had gas, and never let her carry heavy groceries alone. It was tenderness in small doses, but never intensity, never hunger. At first, that was okay. It even felt refreshing. Anna had dated men who were all passion and no stability, men who kissed like fire but burned out just as fast. With Michael, she thought, she had finally found something lasting, safe. But now, married and sharing a bed with him night after night, she sometimes felt like a guest in her own love story. She would lie awake beside him, the room dark except for the soft blue glow of the alarm clock, listening to his even breaths, and wonder, was this it? Was love supposed to feel this quiet? He rarely touched her without reason. A quick kiss before work, a hand on her shoulder if she looked tired, but never anything that made her feel claimed, desired, cherished. She ached for more, not just touch, but connection. That electric something that made your stomach twist and your skin hum, that made you feel alive. Sometimes she questioned herself. Maybe she was asking for too much. Maybe he showed love in his own way, and she was just too romantic for her own good. But deep down she knew it wasn't about fairy tale expectations. It was about needing to be seen, to be wanted, and she had never truly felt that from him. Even on their wedding night, a moment she had built up in her heart as a turning point, a symbolic shedding of all hesitation, Michael had remained hesitant, distant. After the reception, they had walked into the hotel suite hand in hand. She had smiled, excited and hopeful. He had smiled too, a little nervously, and offered her a glass of champagne. They talked for a while, then changed into sleepwear, and laid down, side by side. Anna remembered how she had waited, heart thudding, giving him time to make the first move. But nothing came, just silence. Just the hum of the air conditioner and the soft creak of the mattress beneath them. She turned to him eventually, placed her hand on his chest, and leaned in. Even then, his kiss had been hesitant. Soft, unsure, almost like someone checking to see if it was allowed. She took the lead that night, guided him, held his gaze, reassured him with touches and murmured words. But inside something wilted, because every step felt like it came from her. Every moment of closeness was something she had to create, while he simply followed. That's when the questions began to take root in her mind. Was he afraid? Was it shyness, nor inexperience, or worse, was she simply not someone he desired deeply? It was a terrifying thought. Not because she needed constant validation, but because she had given him everything. Her heart, her trust, her body, her future. And what she yearned for in return wasn't grand gestures or endless praise. It was presence, that unmistakable fire in the eyes of someone who truly sees you, who craves your touch not out of obligation, but out of need. She couldn't ask him. How do you ask the man you married if he's just not into you? Like that. So she kept those thoughts locked, away, buried beneath polite smiles and busy days. She worked, cooked, cleaned, laughed with friends. She held his hand in public, took pictures on holidays, but the ache remained. At night, she'd sometimes whisper to herself, "He loves you. He's just different." And maybe he was. But different didn't make the silence easier to bear. There were moments when she caught him staring at her, during dinner or while she read on the couch, and his gaze was soft, thoughtful. But it never lingered, never darkened with longing, never turned into action. It was like watching a candle that refused to catch fire, no matter how many times you struck the match. She loved him. That much was certain. She loved his quiet intelligence, his thoughtfulness, the way he always knew when she needed space or a warm cup of tea. She loved that he never lied, never made her doubt his loyalty. He was dependable in all the ways that mattered. But love without expression was starting to feel like hunger without food. She didn't want to change him. She just wanted to know if there was more inside him, a layer he had never shown anyone, a part of him that maybe even he didn't fully understand. Could love grow? In silence? Could a heart that doesn't know how to reach still learn to hold? She didn't know, but she hoped. Hoped that maybe one day he would look at her differently, touch her differently, that the careful man she married would surprise her, not with flowers or gifts, but with fire, with desire, with a whisper that said, "I've wanted you this whole time, I just didn't know how." She didn't expect miracles, but she longed for a moment, just one, where he reached for her, not because it was the right time, but because he couldn't wait. Another second, and something told her that moment might be closer than she thought. The wedding had been beautiful. Anna could still remember the scent of peonies filling the garden, the way the sunlight danced across Michael's face as he said his vows, the quiet emotion in his voice as he promised her forever. She had believed him, not just because of the words, but because Michael didn't say things he didn't mean. If he promised something, it was because he intended to keep it. And yet, when the doors to their honeymoon suite closed behind them that night, Anna felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. The room itself was perfect. Candlelight flickered from the bathroom where the tub had been drawn. A bottle of champagne sat chilling beside the bed, and soft instrumental music played in the background like the soundtrack to a romance movie. Michael had thought of everything, down to the lavender petals sprinkled across the white linen. He smiled nervously, asking if she liked it. She said yes, of course she did. But what she didn't say, what she was too afraid to say, was that she wasn't there for the aesthetics. She was there for him. She had hoped, truly hoped, that the magic of that day would awaken something in him, that maybe, once the ceremony was over and the weight of expectations lifted, he would finally relax. That the man she loved would take her in his arms, look at her like she was the only woman in the world, and kiss her like he meant it, kiss her like he couldn't help himself. Instead, what followed was an echo of all the quiet nights before. They sat on the edge of the bed, their wedding clothes exchanged for pajamas, his a neat grey cotton set, hers a delicate satin slip. She had picked out months ago, imagining it would be the start of something unforgettable. Michael complimented her softly, said she looked beautiful. She smiled, whispered, "Thank you." And then, silence. Not the kind that came from comfort or peace, but the kind that gnawed at your insides, the kind that made a woman question herself. Anna waited, giving him space. Maybe he was nervous, she thought. Maybe he just needed a little time. So, she moved closer, gently touched his face and leaned in to kiss him. His lips responded, but not with urgency. There was no tremor in his hands, no rush in his breath. Just polite reciprocation, like a man trying to follow instructions written in a language he barely understood. She tried again, this time with more emotion, her fingers grazing the back of his neck, her body tilting into his. But Michael froze. Just for a second. Just long enough for her to feel it. That pause was louder than words. Still, she didn't stop. She couldn't. She had waited for this moment for months. Not just the act itself, but what it meant. Union, intimacy, the raw expression of a love. That didn't need translation. She wanted to feel him want her. Not because he was her husband, but because he was her man. So she took the lead. Guided him, and he followed, carefully, hesitantly, like someone navigating a room full of fragile glass. Every movement was tentative. Every kiss lacked weight. Every touch seemed to wait for approval. By the time the night ended, Anna was lying. Beside him, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. Her heart not broken, but quietly bruised. She didn't cry. There was nothing dramatic about the moment. It was just empty, and that emptiness whispered questions she wasn't ready to answer. Was he afraid? Was it just nerves? Or was there something deeper? Something he hadn't told her? Something about his past, or something about her. She thought of the stories her friends told, about passion that couldn't wait, about honeymoon nights full of laughter and tangled sheets. But in her suite, there was only silence. Michael kissed her forehead, rolled over and fell asleep within minutes. She lay still, her body warm from the closeness, but her heart cold. Maybe it was just the first time, she told herself. Maybe it would get better. But part of her knew. This wasn't just a lack of experience. This was something else, something locked inside him. In the days that followed, Michael didn't mention it. He kissed her in the mornings, asked if she wanted coffee, planned little outings. He seemed happy, content. And maybe he was. But Anna couldn't shake the feeling that she had been the only one truly present that night. It wasn't about physical satisfaction. It was about the emotional absence, the missing weight in his gaze, the lack of urgency in his touch. It was the realization that, even on the night meant to seal their love in its most sacred form, she had felt alone, and that loneliness, wrapped in silk sheets and candlelight, was far more painful than any fight could have been. She didn't bring it up. Not yet. Because how do you say to the man who gave you a perfect wedding, "I think you forgot to bring your heart"? So she smiled. She made love again, if that's what it could be called, and she waited for him to see her, to really see her, because love, she believed, wasn't just about being chosen. It was about being claimed. And Michael, sweet and gentle Michael, hadn't claimed her at all, not yet. But something in Anna's soul refused to give up. She wasn't angry, she wasn't bitter. She was simply waiting for something to change. For the fire she believed he held inside, for the moment, however far away, when the quiet man she married would finally surprise her. And when that moment came, would it be too late? The days after the honeymoon were filled with smiles. Neighbors brought gifts, co-workers congratulated her at the office, and social media overflowed with comments on how radiant the couple had looked at the wedding. To the world, they were the picture of happiness, and in some ways Anna felt happy too. She had married the man she loved. Their apartment was cozy, filled with soft lighting and bookshelves they built together. Michael cooked for her twice a week, always remembering to toast the bread just the way she liked. He asked about her day, listened attentively, laughed. At her jokes, even the bad ones. He was kind, constant, good. But love, she was learning, was not only about goodness, it was also about touch, about desire, about the subtle tension in the air when someone brushes past you and neither of you can breathe for a second, and that was missing. At first, Anna tried not to think about it. She filled her schedule, volunteered for extra projects, met friends for lunch, told herself that intimacy wasn't everything, that passion could wait, that maybe it wasn't even that important in the long run. But late at night, when Michael's back was turned and the moonlight slipped through the curtains, those quiet doubts came crawling in. Why doesn't he touch me more? Why does it feel like he's holding something back, even when he's holding me? Anna wasn't angry. She was confused, because Michael wasn't cold. He wasn't indifferent. He looked at her with warmth, brought her tea when she was sick, and always remembered the anniversaries of small things, like their first date or the night he asked her to move in. But when it came to physical closeness, something shifted in him. He never reached for her first, never kissed her with hunger, never traced her skin like a man in love with the landscape of the woman he chose. And it wasn't just about sex. It was the lack of weight behind his gaze, the absence of hesitation that usually comes when someone wants you so badly. They're afraid to touch you too fast. That beautiful, delicious ache of longing. Anna missed that ache, even if she'd never fully had it with him. She began to observe other couples, quietly, on the subway, in cafes, during walks through the park. She noticed the way some men couldn't help but tuck a strand of hair behind their partner's ear, or how they rested their hands possessively, gently on the small of her back. That invisible pull between two people who couldn't get close enough. She had never felt that with Michael, and the question that terrified her the most began to echo. Was it me? Was she not enough? Not beautiful enough? Not desirable enough? Had he made a mistake in marrying her, only to realize too late that the chemistry he thought would grow hadn't? She hated that thought. It made her feel cheap, foolish, and still. She couldn't shake it. She looked in the mirror longer than usual now, studied herself the way she imagined he might. Her lips, her skin, the soft curves of her body. She tried different perfumes, let her hair fall differently, bought lingerie she never wore, because deep down she wanted to be seen, to be chosen, not just as a life partner, but as a woman. And Michael, for all his affection and steadiness, made her feel more like a companion than a lover. There were moments she thought of asking him directly, "Do you desire me?" But she couldn't bring herself to do it. She feared the silence more than the answer, feared seeing uncertainty in his eyes, feared hearing something she couldn't unhear. So instead, she waited and wondered. Sometimes during dinner, she'd try to flirt, tease him gently, touch his hand with more intention. He'd smile, squeeze her fingers, and return to the conversation. Other times, she'd come out of the shower wrapped in only a towel, hoping for that look in his eyes, the look that said, "You're mine." But instead, he'd ask if she wanted dessert. He was never rude, never dismissive, just distant, as if a wall stood between them that even he didn't know how to climb. She began to recall things from their dating phase that once seemed charming, but now felt like red flags. How he never kissed her unless she leaned in first. How their first time together had been quiet, cautious, and largely initiated by her. How he had seemed grateful, almost overwhelmed, like a boy given a gift he wasn't sure he deserved. Was it possible he had never been with anyone before her? The idea struck her suddenly one night. They had never talked about it. She had assumed, like most people did, that he had his own history. But what if he didn't? What if Michael had lived his whole life watching love from a distance, reading about it in books, seeing it in movies, but never really feeling it? That would explain the shyness, the hesitation, the way he seemed almost startled whenever she reached for him, and the thought softened her. It gave her a new kind of hope, because inexperience wasn't the same as indifference. A man who didn't know how to touch wasn't necessarily a man who didn't want to. Maybe he just didn't know how to begin, and if that was true, maybe she could help him. The thought came to Anna late one night, when she was lying in bed beside Michael, both of them scrolling silently on their phones, wrapped in their own private worlds. The soft light from the screens illuminated their faces, casting shadows across the ceiling. They weren't arguing, they weren't disconnected, But they weren't connected either, and that was what haunted her the most. It wasn't that he was cruel or inattentive. It was that their marriage felt incomplete, like a song missing its chorus, like a dance with every step memorized, but no music. She turned off her screen and stared at the ceiling. Her body ached, not with desire, but with the weight of absence, an ache born from needing to be wanted, to be pursued, to be seen as more than a companion with benefits of routine. She remembered a conversation with a friend once, someone who had been struggling with her own partner's lack of initiative. "We watched a couple of adult videos together," her friend had said, laughing a little. "It actually helped, gave him ideas, took the pressure off." Anna had dismissed it at the time, thinking it wasn't her style. But now, weeks into a marriage where even a kiss felt rehearsed, she found herself wondering, what if Michael had simply never learned? Not because he didn't care, but because no one had ever taught him. It was a radical thought, a private, unspoken possibility, one she hadn't dared fully consider until now. Maybe his hesitancy wasn't rejection, but confusion. After all, sex wasn't something people learned in school or mastered by reading novels. It was messy and vulnerable, and most people stumbled their way into it through trial, error, and a bit of awkward courage. But what if Michael had never had those chances? What if no one had ever made him feel safe enough to explore that side of himself? And suddenly, Anna didn't feel frustrated anymore. She felt compassion. She turned slightly, watching him scroll through some photography blog. His brow was furrowed, in concentration, his thumb moving steadily across the screen. He looked peaceful, calm, and untouched. She hesitated, her heart thudding against her ribs. Was this a crazy idea? Would he be offended? Would he think she was accusing him of being inadequate? Or worse, would he feel ashamed? But then again, hadn't. They'd already been stuck in a quiet dance for too long. How much longer could they pretend that everything was fine when both of them knew something was missing? So she took a deep breath and spoke. "Hey," she said softly, almost casually. Michael glanced at her, smiling. "Yeah?" She hesitated again, choosing her words carefully. "I've been thinking, maybe we could try something new." His smile didn't fade, but his eyes narrowed slightly, curious. "Like what?" She tried to keep her voice light. "I read somewhere that some couples watch, adult videos together, as a way to learn, to open up, to talk about things they never thought to try." Michael blinked, surprised. "Really?" Anna nodded, her voice even. "Yeah, not as something dirty or awkward, more like a starting point for us, just to explore." There was a pause, and then something flickered in his expression. Not offense, not shame, curiosity. He looked at her a moment longer, then said slowly, "I've never done that before." "I figured," she replied gently, "and that's okay." He nodded, thoughtful. "You think it would help?" "I don't know," she said honestly, "but I think it might be easier than trying to explain things with words. Maybe it could show what I mean when I say I want to feel close, wanted, desired." There was a long silence between them. Not uncomfortable, just full. Then, quietly, he said, "Okay, let's try." Anna felt a rush of something warm bloom in her chest. Relief, gratitude, maybe even hope. She reached for the remote and pulled up a streaming app. Not one of those flashy, aggressive sites, but a softer, more artistic platform she had researched. Earlier out of curiosity. It felt less threatening somehow, more human. She didn't want to shock him, she wanted to invite him. They sat close, side by side, watching the screen. At first it was awkward. Michael shifted uncomfortably, clearing his throat once or twice. Anna kept glancing at him, unsure if she had pushed too far, but then something changed. She saw his posture relax. His eyes lingered, his breathing shifted, not in a crude or wild way, but with interest. Focus. As if he was studying something unfamiliar but important. And when he looked at her, really looked at her, there was something new behind his gaze, awareness, desire, and a hint of vulnerability. Anna's heart pounded, not because of what was on the screen, but because of what was beginning to flicker between them. A new thread, a new possibility. He reached for her hand, laced his fingers through hers, and for the first time since their wedding night, she felt chosen, not by default, not out of duty, but chosen. Michael didn't say much that night, but when the video ended and they turned off the screen, his hand didn't let go of hers, and when he leaned in to kiss her, slowly, tentatively, there was a new weight behind it, a spark, small but real, and Anna knew something had begun. Anna woke the next morning with a quiet sense of something having shifted, though she couldn't quite name what. The sun filtered gently through the blinds, casting soft golden lines across the floor. Michael was still asleep beside her, his face relaxed, his breath steady. She lay still, not wanting to wake him just yet, letting the warmth of the moment settle in. There had been no grand transformation the night before, no fireworks or sudden surge of confidence, but something had undeniably changed. It was in the way Michael had looked at her during the video, curious, attentive, almost like he was discovering a language he never knew he wanted to speak. It was in the way his hand had tightened slightly around hers, as though anchoring himself to her as he stepped into unfamiliar waters. It was in that kiss, tentative, yes, but no longer devoid of heat. For the first time, she hadn't been the only one initiating, and that mattered. It was subtle, maybe imperceptible to anyone else, but Anna felt it deep in her bones. Michael had crossed an invisible line, one that had held him back for months, maybe even for years. Later that morning, as they sipped coffee at the small kitchen table, he glanced at her over the rim of his mug. "About last night," he began. She looked up gently. "Yeah?" He paused, searching for the words. "It wasn't what I expected. I mean, I thought I'd feel awkward, or embarrassed, but I didn't." Anna smiled, relieved. "I was a little nervous, too." He nodded. "But, man, it made me think. There's so much I don't know, so much I didn't realize I'd never learned. I guess I assumed intimacy would just happen, that I'd figure it out naturally once we were married." She reached across the table and touched his hand. "There's no rule book, Michael. Everyone learns at their own pace. I'm just glad you're open to trying." He held her gaze for a moment. "I want to be better at this, not just for you, for us. I didn't realize how much I've been holding back." His voice caught slightly, like the admission was heavier than expected. Anna squeezed his fingers. "You're not alone. We're in this together." There was something beautiful in the rawness of the moment. No performance, no expectations. Just two people finally beginning to speak a language they had danced around for too long. That night, things felt different. They didn't put on a video this time. Instead, they talked. Michael asked questions, simple, sincere ones, what she liked, what made her feel close, what she wished he'd do more of. Anna answered with honesty but without pressure. She didn't want to overwhelm him. She wanted him to feel safe, safe enough to be bold. And he was, not suddenly, not all at once, but slowly, intentionally. When he kissed her that night, there was a quiet urgency behind it. Not polished or practiced, but real. She felt his hands tremble slightly as they touched her waist, his breath catch when she whispered something in his ear. He was learning not just how, but why. Why touch mattered, why presence mattered, why she had been aching for this, not out of neediness, but out of longing to be seen, claimed, wanted. She didn't lead this time. He did. Clumsily at first, like someone walking through a room with the lights off, but with each step he grew steadier. His kisses grew deeper, his touch more confident. He explored her with curiosity, reverence, and something else, something he hadn't shown before. Desire. And Anna responded not with instruction, but with encouragement, with soft moans, approving sighs, fingers tangled in his hair. Not to guide him, but to let him know he was doing just fine. By the time they lay in each other's arms, limbs tangled and breath still shallow, Anna felt a peace she hadn't felt in months, not because everything was suddenly perfect, but because something had finally begun. The next few days felt lighter. Michael was more physically present, not in grand, sweeping ways, but in subtle, steady gestures. A hand on her lower back as they moved through the grocery store. A kiss on the side of her neck when she stood at the sink. A playful brush of his fingers along her arm while watching a movie. Anna noticed every touch, every glance. She didn't need him to become someone else. She just needed him to show up fully. And now, piece by piece, he was. And it made her fall in love with him all over again, not for who he had been, but for who he was choosing to become. She hadn't realized how lonely she'd felt until the loneliness started to lift, like fog burning away under morning sun. One night, as they were getting ready for bed, Michael came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. She was brushing her teeth, hair pulled back, wearing an old oversized t-shirt, not exactly lingerie model material. Still, he kissed her shoulder and said softly, "You're so beautiful." She turned, toothpaste still in her mouth, and gave him a surprised look. He smiled. "What? Can't I admire my wife?" Anna laughed, rinsed, and leaned into his chest. "You can. Just don't stop." He didn't, and she knew then. It was just the beginning. The transformation didn't happen all at once. It unfolded slowly, like the first signs of spring after a long, quiet winter. But Anna noticed it, not in fireworks or declarations, but in the way Michael began to reach for her when he thought she wasn't looking, in the way his fingers lingered a little longer when they touched, in how his eyes, once kind but distant, now held something deeper, something she had waited so long to see. Hunger. It was a Thursday evening. Ordinary, by all appearances. They had made dinner together, roasted chicken, sweet potatoes, a salad with too much lemon, just the way Anna liked. Michael opened a bottle of wine, and they sat at the kitchen table talking about everything and nothing. There was laughter, easy and warm. He teased her gently about the way she always had to organize the fridge after grocery shopping. She rolled her eyes but smiled, knowing he was right. And all the while a quiet current buzzed between them, not loud, not urgent, but alive. After dinner they cleaned the kitchen together. Anna tied her hair into a loose bun, humming to herself as she rinsed plates. Michael stood beside her, drying dishes. It was domestic, simple. But something in the air had changed. He bumped her hip with his playfully. She looked at him over her shoulder, amused. "Careful, sir. That's sacred dishwashing territory." He didn't reply with a joke. Instead, he leaned in slowly and kissed her shoulder, a soft, unhurried kiss. Then another, a little higher, and another, brushing the curve of her neck. She froze, not in discomfort but surprise. Because it was new, unprompted, unscripted, deliberate. "Michael," she asked softly. He rested his forehead against the back of her head, his voice quiet. "I think about you all the time. I just never knew how to show it." She turned to face him. His eyes were darker than usual, not with sadness, but with something that looked a lot like desire held in too long. "You don't have to be perfect," she said. "I don't want perfect," he replied. "I want you." The words weren't poetic. They weren't rehearsed, but they hit her like thunder in her chest. She reached for him, kissed him slowly, savoring the way his mouth moved with more certainty than before. His hands found her waist, then her hips. And this time, they didn't hesitate. There was no awkward pause, no polite retreat, just presence, just him, there, fully. He led her out of the kitchen, fingers laced with hers, not to the bedroom but to the living room. He didn't turn off the lights. He didn't wait for the perfect moment. He just began. On the couch under the dim glow of the lamp, with the faint hum of traffic outside grounding them in reality, Michael kissed her like a man who had decided, finally, to let himself feel. His kisses were firmer now, fuller, and when his hands roamed her body, they did so with reverence and curiosity. He wasn't copying anyone. He wasn't imitating a scene from the night before. He was there, with her, for her, learning her as if she were a song he finally allowed himself to hear. Anna gasped softly when his fingers brushed the hem of her shirt and slipped underneath. Her skin responded instantly, goosebumps trailing in his wake. He paused, just for a second, eyes meeting hers. "Okay?" he asked. She nodded. "Yes. More than okay." What followed wasn't hurried or frantic. It was slow, intentional. His touches were careful but bolder now. He kissed her collarbone, her shoulders, her waist, stopping to look at her, to learn what made her sigh, what made her shiver, what made her smile with closed eyes. Anna felt like she was being discovered, not just physically, but soul-deep. Every gesture said, "I want to know you, I want to understand how to love you," not just with words, but with hands, with lips, with presence. And she gave herself to that moment completely. She didn't need perfection, she needed effort. And Michael was giving her exactly that. Effort wrapped in honesty, wrapped in the quiet passion of a man no longer afraid of wanting. Later, they moved to the bedroom. He undressed her with patience, not rushing. And this time, he didn't. "Look away." His eyes drank her in like she was something sacred. When he kissed her stomach, her thighs, her chest, there was no trace of shame or uncertainty, only curiosity and care. When he made love to her that night, it felt different. Not because of any technical change, but because his heart was finally in it. She could feel it in the way he held her afterward, in the way he kept whispering, "You're so beautiful," as if he had just realized it himself, in the way he didn't turn away or drift off immediately, but instead traced circles on her back with his fingertips. They talked in the dark for over an hour. He told her he'd always been afraid of not being enough. She told him he always had been. He admitted that physical intimacy had always confused him, made him feel like an outsider. Something about growing up in a household where feelings weren't discussed, where affection was rarely shown. His body had never learned the language of touch, and his heart had learned to stay quiet. Anna listened, and then she kissed his palm. "You don't need to apologize for what you didn't know," she said. "You're here now. You're learning. That's all that matters." He pulled her close, and she felt his breath warm against her hair. "I want to keep learning," he said. "With you." Anna closed her eyes. For the first time, she didn't feel like she was waiting for him. He was here, present, awake, desiring, and maybe, just maybe, they were only at the beginning of something beautiful. It had only been a few days since that night, since something in Michael had quietly, undeniably shifted. There was no announcement, no dramatic change in routine, but Anna could feel it in the air between them, like the subtle scent of a flower blooming in another room. Michael was present in a new way, not just physically but emotionally, attentive, open. He was still soft-spoken and gentle, but there was a new layer of intentionality in the way he looked at her, touched her, moved around their shared space. And for Anna, even the ordinary had begun to feel extraordinary. It was a Saturday afternoon when the moment came, the kind of lazy day that used to stretch out in silence. Michael had offered to do the grocery run, insisting she take a long bath and relax. She had laughed at his insistence. He was rarely assertive about anything domestic, but she agreed, letting him take her list and her canvas bag. When he returned, she was still in her robe, hair damp, skin flushed from the hot water. She was humming softly as she chopped garlic at the counter, preparing one of their favorite pasta dishes. The kitchen smelled of basil and lemon zest. Soft music played in the background, some acoustic playlist they both liked, with gentle guitar chords and nostalgic vocals. She didn't hear him walk in. Michael stepped quietly behind her, setting the grocery bags down without a word. And then, without warning, his arms wrapped around her waist from behind, firm, warm, steady. Anna gasped softly, not in alarm but in surprise. It wasn't that he had never hugged her before, but this was different. This was unprompted, unscripted, real. He buried his face in the crook of her neck, breathing her in, holding her like someone who didn't want to be anywhere else in the world. Anna froze for a second, heart racing. Not because of the hug itself, but because of the meaning behind it. This was affection without instruction, desire without a nudge. She reached up, covering his hands with hers. "What's this for?" she whispered, a smile blooming on her lips. He didn't answer right away, just tightened his grip slightly, pressing a soft kiss to her neck. "For you," he finally said, "just because." She turned her head enough to glance at him, meeting his eyes. There was something different in them now, still calm, still gentle, but no longer uncertain, no longer distracted. He was here. They stood like that for a while, wrapped in silence and garlic and background music, until Anna finally turned in his arms to face him fully. "You're getting good at this," she said, teasing gently. Michael chuckled, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "I've had a great teacher." The flirtation was light, but the emotion beneath it was deep. Anna reached up and touched his cheek. "I missed this. I missed you." He nodded slowly. "I think I've been here, just behind a wall, one I didn't even know was there. And now, I'm ready to tear it down." They kissed then, not passionately, not hungrily, but deeply. A kiss of presence, a kiss of gratitude, a kiss that said, "I see you. I choose you, I'm not hiding anymore." Dinner was a little late that night. The garlic nearly burned, but neither of them cared. Later, as they sat at the table, bowls steaming with pasta and the wine half gone, Anna kept stealing glances at Michael. There was a softness in his smile, a looseness in his shoulders. And when he reached across the table to hold her hand, it wasn't a habit. It was a choice, a moment of intimacy, initiated not out of routine, but desire. That night, as they washed dishes side by side, he bumped her shoulder and whispered in her ear, "I've been thinking about you all day." She turned, raising an eyebrow. "In what way?" He leaned closer. "In every way." And just like that, her breath caught. Because those weren't words he used to say. He had once struggled to express even the simplest affection. And now, here he was, whispering things that made her heart flutter, holding her in the middle of the kitchen like they were the only two people alive, kissing her neck just because he felt like it. It wasn't about grand gestures. It was about this. Moments like this. Real, grounded, intimate. Later that night, they lay on the couch, her head on his chest, legs tangled, the television playing something neither of them was really watching. Michael ran his fingers slowly through her hair. "I didn't know how much I needed this, until I started losing the fear of it." Anna tilted her head. "Fear of what?" He hesitated. "Fear that I'd do it wrong, that I'd disappoint you, that I'd never be the kind of man who could make you feel so wanted." She sat up slightly, touched his chest. "You already are, just by being present, just by trying." He pulled her close again. "I want to keep surprising you." Anna smiled against his shoulder. "You already have." But as she closed her eyes, heart full, she couldn't help but wonder. What other surprises did he have in store? Anna was distracted, folding some clothes in the bedroom, when she noticed that Michael was taking longer than usual downstairs. She heard some footsteps, a brief sound of running water, then silence. She found it curious, but didn't worry. She was becoming more accustomed to the small mysteries that Michael began to create. Since that night in the living room, since the first genuine gesture of desire, something inside him seemed to have awakened. Not a burst of uncontrolled passion, but a silent decision to be present, to learn, to surprise her, not with flowers or expensive gifts, but with sincere gestures, small, but full of meaning. And that night, she would feel it like never before. Love. She called from the bedroom door, stepping down the first 2 stairs. No answer. The house was dimly lit and there was a different scent in the air. Lavender, vanilla, something soft and enveloping, as if the atmosphere itself had become an invitation. It was then that she saw it. At the bedroom door, a small note taped with a piece of tape. "Close your eyes. Trust me." Anna smiled, feeling her heart race. Not from fear, but from curiosity, and an emotion she hadn't expected to feel again. Anticipation. The kind that only happens when someone cares about the details for you, when someone thinks about your pleasure before their own. She closed her eyes just as the note had asked. "I'm here," Michael said, his voice soft near the stairs. She heard his steps, then felt his fingers gently touch her hand. "Come with me." He guided her down the hallway calmly, and Anna noticed the change in the room's temperature, the warm comfort of the bedroom, the soft texture of the rug under her bare feet. And then he stopped. "Open your eyes." Anna opened her eyes and almost held her breath. The bedroom was transformed, curtains drawn, soft yellow lights, not from the ceiling, but from dozens of small candles safely placed on shelves, tables, and windowsills. On the floor, rose petals scattered gently. There was a low instrumental playlist playing, like a soundtrack to a moment only they would understand. In the center of the bed, a new white, immaculate sheet. On top of it, a small bottle of body oil, and beside it another note, written with the same calm handwriting. "Tonight I just want to take care of you." Anna brought her hand to her mouth, moved, not by the obvious romance, but by what the gesture meant. Michael was there fully. For the first time he had taken the lead in an intimate moment, and he had done it thinking of her, her pleasure, her well-being. "You did all this," she began, but he interrupted her with a shy smile. "I just thought about how I'd want you to feel. Special. Safe. Loved." Anna didn't answer. She simply walked to him and hugged him, long and silently. And then, without rushing, without unnecessary words, he began. Michael asked her to lie on her stomach and took the small bottle of oil. His hands, once hesitant, now moved with more confidence, not out of experience but out of surrender. The first drop of oil landed warm on her back. Anna shivered slightly, closing her eyes, surrendering. His hands began to glide, first on her back, then on her shoulders, moving down to her arms, always with gentle pressure, as if touching her was a privilege. It was different from anything she had ever experienced with him. Every movement said, "I see you." He massaged not only her body, but the silent accumulation of emotions, the months of waiting, the knots of insecurity. And as he gave himself to this gesture of care, Anna felt something dissolve within her, something heavy, something she hadn't known she was still carrying. Michael knelt beside her, and for a few seconds just watched. As if admiring was part of the ritual, then with his fingertips he traced invisible lines along her waist, her thighs, the side of her face, always attentive, always asking with his gaze if everything was okay, and it was. It was more than okay. Anna felt enveloped by a love that was finally freeing itself from fear, a love that was learning to speak through touch, through initiative, through silent presence, and above all, through intention. She turned to face him. "What changed?" she asked in a whisper. He thought for a second before responding. "I stopped thinking I needed to know everything, to start doing something," she smiled. And I started just feeling, with you, for you." They kissed then, right there, with delicacy but firmness. Michael was discovering his own rhythm, one that didn't come from manuals or videos, but from sincere observation, from a real desire to please her, to connect. And that night, when they gave themselves to each other, there was no choreography. There was presence. He caressed her body as if thanking her. She surrendered as if trusting. And between kisses, caresses, and silent smiles, Anna felt her heart warm with something new, a certainty that had taken time to arrive, but was now settling. Firmly, he's here, with me, by choice, by love, fully and still. As she fell asleep in his arms, a soft question lingered, suspended in the air. If this is the beginning, how far could we go together? Anna woke up before the sun, wrapped in the warmth of Michael's arms. The room was still dark except for a faint bluish light filtering through the cracks in the curtains. His breath was steady, his chest rising and falling in a serene rhythm, and his hand rested on her waist like a silent anchor. She didn't want to move. She didn't want to break that moment. There was something sacred in it, not just the contact, but what it represented. That hand resting on her was no longer a mechanical or insecure gesture. It was presence, choice, bond. As if, even while asleep, he was saying, "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." Anna closed her eyes again and for a moment remembered the early weeks of their marriage, the heavy silences, the timid touches, the doubt that ate away inside her, even when she smiled on the outside. And now he was there. Changed. Not because she demanded it, but because he decided. He decided to learn. He decided to feel. He decided to love fully. When Michael woke, the first thing he did was pull her closer. With his eyes still closed, he kissed her exposed shoulder and murmured something inaudible. Anna smiled, a smile that came from her chest, not just her lips. "Good morning," she said, turning to face him. He opened his eyes slowly, still sleepy, but with that new spark she was still getting used to seeing. "Good morning, my love." It wasn't the first time he had called her that, but that morning it sounded different, as if every word was imbued with truth, with desire, with a silent intention. They lay there looking at each other. No rush, no need to fill the space with conversation, and when their lips finally met, it was as if the world disappeared for a moment. Michael kissed her with a kind of attention she had never felt before, as if every movement was chosen, as if he was writing something with his mouth, a letter without words, made only of feeling. His hands began to explore her body with tenderness, but also with a new kind of firmness. There was no hesitation anymore. He knew where she was sensitive, where she trembled, where she relaxed. And more than that, he wanted to know, with patience, with surrender, with love. Anna felt every touch, not only on her skin, but deep inside her soul. It was as if, finally, their bodies had stopped being barriers and had become bridges. As if, for the first time, the physical was not separate from the emotional, but completely intertwined. When he hugged her from behind, slowly caressing her waist, she closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Her body responded naturally, effortlessly, as if they were dancing to a song they both knew. Even without having rehearsed it, Michael kissed every inch of her skin with reverence, and she felt that, in that gesture, there was more than desire. There was gratitude, there was regret for the times he had pulled away. There was a silent promise: "I see you now, and I want to keep seeing you." As they united in that new, intimate encounter, there was no rush, no concern for perfection, just touch, skin, breath, connection and tears. Yes, tears from Anna, but not from pain, from healing, because in that moment she wasn't just being loved, she was being felt, with all her layers, with all her pain and desires, as if finally her soul had found space to rest in the arms of someone. When it was over, she lay on his chest, feeling his heartbeat strong, as if it wanted to speak. Michael ran his fingers through her hair, drawing invisible lines on her scalp. And then, in a voice almost shy, he whispered, "I never thought I'd be able to surrender like this." Anna lifted her head and looked at him. "And now? Now, I don't want to stop." She moved closer, their noses almost touching. This is love," Michael nodded. "I know, because now I feel it." They spent the rest of the morning together, having breakfast in bed, laughing, exchanging soft caresses, talking about memories they'd never had the courage to share. He told her about his childhood, marked by a silent home where touch was rare and love seemed more like a responsibility than an expression. She spoke about her thirst for connection since adolescence, and how she always felt that loving was something to be felt with the skin, not just spoken. And there, in the messy bed, amidst crumbs of bread and leftover strawberries, something so even bigger was forming. It wasn't just sex, it was intimacy, it wasn't just warmth, it was home. And as the afternoon advanced, and the sun streamed through the cracks more forcefully, Anna looked at Michael and for the first time in a long time didn't wish for anything more, because she had everything. And yet a sweet and restless thought whispered in her chest, if this depth is possible now, what else still awaits us on the journey? What started as a shy awakening gradually transformed into a dance that became more and more in tune. Not because Anna and Michael had memorized steps or learned formulas, but because finally they were listening to each other, not with their ears but with their bodies, with their skin, with their hearts. Their intimate relationship was no longer a silent or tense field. It had become a living territory, full of nuances, where desire and affection met with freedom. With every new touch, every night spent together, Anna realized clearly, Michael hadn't just learned to surrender. He wanted to surrender, and that made all the difference. The nights began to have a different rhythm. There was no longer that anxiety hidden in his gaze, or that hesitation in his gestures. He touched her naturally, with desire, with genuine pleasure. And more than that, and with intention. Anna saw in his eyes a glow that hadn't been there before, a kind of silent confidence, as if he had discovered that loving physically was also a way of speaking. And he was learning to speak fluently. One night, after a simple dinner on the balcony, they sat on the couch to watch a movie. But the movie never started. A lingering look, a shy smile, and the touch of his fingers on her legs were enough for the world around them to disappear. He kissed her slowly, deeply. His hands explored every curve of her body with patient tenderness, not the kind that hesitates, but the kind that respects. And she, feeling his touch, knew that he was no longer the same man from weeks ago. He wasn't the Michael who just touched her with doubt. He was the Michael who delighted in touching her, who discovered pleasure in provoking pleasure, who understood that affection could be an invitation, but it could also be a response. And in his eyes, Anna saw something even more precious, presence. Because now, every time they were together, he was there, whole, surrendered, attentive, as if every touch were a prayer and every sigh a response. The sexual relationship between them stopped being a reserved, silent, almost shy moment, and became something alive, spontaneous. Michael began to take initiative, not only in the bedroom but in unexpected moments. A warmer kiss in the kitchen, a prolonged hug in the hallway, a touch on the back while she washed her face, followed by a, "You're so beautiful." Anna felt her body respond in a new way, not just with excitement but with freedom, because when there is trust, even desire blooms differently. And now there was trust in every look, in every whispered smile between kisses, in every word spoken. In the dark, Michael also became more verbal, not with long phrases, but with short declarations that carried immense power. "I think about you all day. Your scent calms me. I want you now, just you." Each of these sentences was like a key, unlocking doors of pleasure in her that had never been touched with such delicacy. And the most surprising part, he did it effortlessly, because it didn't come from obligation, it came from connection. They learned to laugh together during their most intimate moments. Sometimes when things didn't go as expected, when a movement was awkward or a kiss turned into a laugh, they didn't get frustrated. They just laughed, and then kissed again, even more connected, even more complicit. Anna realized that now they were dancing to the same rhythm, not because someone was leading, but because they were synchronized by the desire to make it work. Michael began to anticipate her desires. He knew when she wanted more slowness, when she needed silence, when the touch should be firmer. He read her like she was a book he didn't just love but respected. And in return she surrendered without fear. The trust grew. The surrender became deeper and deeper. And with that something new was born. A sense of partnership in pleasure. It was no longer about who gave and who received. It was about sharing. Michael began to ask more. "What do you feel when I do this? Do you want me to keep going? Are you enjoying it this way? Or would you prefer something different?" But the most beautiful part was that these questions didn't come with shame or insecurity. They came with naturalness, like someone wanting to understand the other's language and not just dominate. Anna felt that over the weeks, they had created a new way of loving, one that didn't come ready-made from the outside, but was built right there, between four walls and two naked hearts. One night, exhausted after a long workday, they lay side by side, and Michael simply stretched his arm out and said, "I just want you here, like this, that's enough for me." And she lay on his chest, feeling his heart beat calmly, and thought, maybe this is what I've always wanted. A love that knows how to touch, but also knows how to stop and just stay. In the days that followed, their harmony solidified. Michael didn't need videos, scripts, or tips anymore. He now knew what worked for them. Because he had learned in the most sincere way, by observing, asking, trying, listening. And Anna knew, loving someone like this isn't about finding perfection. It's about finding someone willing to evolve with you, in the soul, in the body, and in the touch. But what she didn't expect was that the next touch that would change everything wouldn't come from his hands. It would come from life itself, which was already growing inside her, silent, small, and miraculously present. Anna's body started changing before she even consciously noticed. First, it was the sensitivity in her chest. Then, a slight exhaustion that followed her even after a full night's sleep. She blamed the workload, the unseasonably warm weather, the intense routine. But there was something else, something silent, something alive. She began to suspect when she lost her appetite for her favorite coffee, a rich blend that she and Michael used to prepare every morning. On the fourth consecutive day, she turned it down. He furrowed his brow and asked, "Are you okay? I've never seen you say no to your coffee." Anna shrugged, trying to joke it off. "Maybe I've developed a more refined taste." But inside, her heart raced. That night, lying next to Michael, she felt her body warmer, her senses sharper. His touch was still a balm, but something inside her felt different, as if her very skin was preparing for a new role. It was by the end of that week, alone in the bathroom, that the test confirmed it. 2 lines. Clear, definitive. Anna felt the world spin for a few seconds. She sat on the edge of the bathtub, the test in her hand, her heart beating in her chest like it wanted to leap out. Tears came before the smile even appeared. She didn't know if she was ready, but she was happy and scared and incredibly moved. Because there in front of her was more than a result. There was a promise, the fruit of everything they had lived, the silent struggles, the touches learned, the glances that had finally become true. Inside her now, there was the deepest symbol of connection 2 bodies and 2 souls could create. She decided to wait until Sunday to tell him. She prepared a simple dinner, with the dishes Michael loved the most. She dimmed the lights in the house, just like the nights when he used to prepare surprises for her. And in the center of the table, beside his napkin, she placed a small white box with a ribbon. "What's this?" he asked, smiling, as he noticed the unexpected gift. "Open it," she said, trying to keep her tone light, but with her eyes already teary. Inside the box was a tiny pair of light gray baby shoes and a handwritten note. "Our love now has one more heart beating for us." Michael went silent. Time seemed to stop. He looked at the shoes, then at her. "Anna," he murmured. She nodded, tears already streaming. "Yes, I'm pregnant." He put his hands to his face, his eyes wide and moist. Then he stood up, went to her and embraced her with a strength she had never felt before. Not a physical strength, but an emotional one. A total surrender. I don't know what to say," he whispered, his voice choked. "You don't need to say anything, just stay with me here." He knelt in front of her, placing his head on her belly, as if he wanted to listen to what was barely forming inside. And in that gesture, Anna saw everything she needed. Michael was no longer the man afraid of touch. Now he was touching the invisible, what had yet to be born. In the days that followed, he dove into the newness with the same care and surrender with which he had learned to touch her. He studied the symptoms, prepared fresh fruit for breakfast, carried the shopping bags without letting her touch anything heavy. But more than that, he observed her and admired her. "You're different," he said one night, lying with his head on her lap. "Puffy," she joked. "Beautiful, serene." "Radiant," he replied without hesitation. Anna ran her fingers through his hair. "Sometimes I still wonder if all of this is real." He looked at her, serious. "I do too. But then I remember how much we fought to find each other, and I think maybe love really does start like this. Confused, shy, full of stumbles. And then it blossoms." Anna smiled, feeling the baby move gently for the first time. It wasn't that pain. It was like a touch from the inside, a nudge, a reminder. They were ready, And even with all the fears, with all the uncertainties, there was a peace in the air. As if, finally, they were home. Not the home of walls and windows, but the one built in an embrace, in a look, in shared silence. Michael began to talk to her belly almost every night. "Hi, little one. This is Daddy. I promise I'll learn everything you need me to, and love you every day." And every time he did that, Anna knew, the man who once feared showing love, now overflowed with it. And although there was still one final chapter, to live, the birth of that little life, Anna already felt that in some way they had been reborn too. But she still didn't realize that the newly born love would gain a name, and that this name would become the strongest link between her and Michael. 6 months later, the garden was in full spring bloom. The flowers that Anna had planted with her own hands, and that Michael carefully had learned to water every Sunday, were now blossoming with color and life. Butterflies danced among the lavenders, and the sound of children's laughter from the house next door mingled with the birdsong, creating a soft soundtrack for a new beginning. It was the day of the birth, not just of a daughter, but of a new story. Michael had stayed, up all night at the hospital, sitting by Anna's bed, holding her hand with firm fingers and a gaze full of tenderness. He didn't try to control the situation. He didn't hide his emotions. On the contrary, he cried, smiled, trembled. He was vulnerable like never before, and it was beautiful to see. "Breathe with me," he whispered, between contractions. "I'm here. It's all going to be okay." And it was. Charlotte was born at noon with her eyes closed and a loud cry, a small sound but powerful, as if she was saying, "I'm here, and you're already mine." When the doctor placed her on Anna's chest, she cried silently, stroking the small head, feeling the warmth of that tiny body that had grown inside her. Michael couldn't stop looking. "She's perfect," he repeated, as if it were a mantra. And she was. But what moved Anna the most in that moment wasn't just the miracle of life, it was the miracle of transformation. Michael, the man who once feared even touching, was now holding that little life with firm hands and eyes full of love. He kissed the baby's forehead as if he had known her for years, as if, somehow, he had always known she would come. During the first days at home, the couple discovered a new kind of intimacy, the kind that is born from shared exhaustion, sleepless nights, and the small daily victories. The first bath, the first smile, the first attentive look from the baby who seemed to absorb everything. Anna, even exhausted, felt complete. She watched Michael walk through the living room with Charlotte in his arms, humming softly made-up songs, and she knew that the man standing before her was no longer the same one she had married. He had blossomed. Each gesture showed a love, built with patience, with choices, with courage, a love that hadn't come ready-made, but a love that had come true. One Sunday afternoon, while Charlotte slept in her crib, Anna and Michael sat side by side on the couch, hands intertwined. The house was quiet, but not the same kind of silence as before. It was a living silence, the kind that exists between two people who no longer need to explain themselves. "We've come this far," she said emotionally, "and everything is still just beginning," he replied. Anna rested her head on his shoulder. "I look at you now and see everything I prayed for when I felt alone." Michael kissed her forehead. "I look at you and see the woman who taught me what true love is, without haste, without demands, just with presence." She smiled, with teary eyes. "Do you love me?" He looked into her eyes. "More than ever, in every possible way, and in every way I will still learn." That was the answer her heart had always been waiting for, not because it was grand, but because it was real. Their relationship wasn't perfect. There would still be difficult days, arguments, long nights. But now there was a foundation that supported everything. Truth, surrender, and mutual growth. And there was Charlotte. The living proof that love, even when it starts shyly, can become immense. Anna looked out the window at the garden. The afternoon, sun gilded the leaves, and a light breeze swayed the tree branches. She thought of everything they had lived, The insecurity at the beginning, the silent tears, the first time he touched her with genuine desire, the notes, the unexpected hugs, the smiles after love. And she thought, this is why it was worth not giving up. That night, as they placed Charlotte in her crib, Michael took the little hand of their daughter and said, "May you grow knowing that love is possible. Even when it takes time to bloom, even when it starts in silence, it always finds a way." Anna looked at him with tenderness. "You became the man who was always inside you. You just needed to believe you could let him out." He smiled. "And you were the bridge between fear and courage." They embraced, lingering, and finally, as they turned off the lights and lay down together, Anna thought, if true love exists, it looks like this, with a house made of arms, with promises whispered in the dark, with a baby breathing peacefully in the room next door, and with two hearts that after so many silences learned to beat together. But there was still something she didn't foresee. How many other forms could this love still take? Love doesn't always come like it does in the movies, full of promises, passionate kisses, and sunset declarations. Sometimes it arrives shyly. It arrives as silence between two bodies, as a hesitant touch that doesn't yet know what to say. But when there is presence, when there's the courage to stay even without knowing exactly how to love, love blooms. It grows between simple notes, hugs in the kitchen, eyes that learn how to truly see. Michael wasn't born ready, and Anna didn't demand perfection. She just stayed, believed, waited, and he chose to learn. With her. For her. In the end, it wasn't the wedding, the honeymoon, or the vows that changed everything. It was the simplest gesture, the unexpected touch, the hug that said, "I choose you." Now and again, every day. And have you ever experienced a love that started in silence but ended in bloom? Have you ever been touched by someone who, little by little, learned to love with all their body and soul? If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and tell us in the comments, where are you listening to this story from? Your like helps this channel grow and keep bringing emotional stories like this one. Share it with someone special.